Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
September 11th, 2001 is a day that is still fresh in the minds of the American people today, 18 years later, and for some, they remember it like it was yesterday. Early Tuesday morning on September 11th, 19 men, part of Al-Qaeda, hijacked flights American Airlines 11 and United Airlines 175 using box cutter knives they smuggled through airport security and crashed them into the World Trade Center, claiming the lives of 2,753 people, including 412 emergency workers such as firefighters, policemen, and paramedics who bravely tried to evacuate people from inside the towers to be treated at safer locations. But due to the intensity of the heat from the burning jet fuel and the height of the fire, it was impossible for the firefighters to stop the fire from burning, which melted the steel supports that ultimately led to the collapse of the towers. People who found themselves above the floors impacted by the planes would be trapped and unable to be rescued because of the collapsed stairways and inoperable elevators. Where were you on the morning of September 11th?
I was heading into work in Boston, sitting in traffic stuck on a bridge, watching the planes from Logan take off right over my head.
How did you become aware that something was wrong?
One of my coworkers happened to be on the internet, and breaking news came on saying a plane had hit a skyscraper in New York City. And that's all we knew.
What did you think was happening?
We first thought that it was just a small plane, had some crazy person just drove it into a skyscraper. And then more news came over that another plane had hit the other World Trade Center tower, and that there was another couple planes supposedly hijacked, and one was heading back towards Washington, D.C. So it just got very scary.
What were your first thoughts when you realized what had happened?
Well, it came over the news that that the United States was under a terror attack, and that the planes had left Logan Airport, and they didn't know how many had been hijacked. And so far, they were sure of 4, 2 of which that had already hit the World Trade Center towers. And one had then hit, it all happened, I think, within an hour and a half. Another one hit the Pentagon, and then another one went down in a field. But we were told to evacuate Boston because they said that the planes had originated from Boston, and they didn't know if we were also a target. So we literally had to file out of the towers we were in Boston, in the financial district. And they told us to just run towards the Seaport district and get out of Boston. So nobody hopped on the trains. Everybody went to the Seaport Hotel, sat there, and just waited for word on what to do.
What is your most vivid memory of that day?
Sitting at the Seaport Hotel with hundreds of other people who had to do the same thing, because it was complete gridlock and people were beeping horns. It was like a movie. It seemed so unreal. And we were sitting there and watching these big screen TVs, and we actually watched the first World Trade Center building completely collapse. And we thought that was bad. And then the second World Trade Center building collapsed. And it was surreal. It didn't seem real.
Looking back, how has September 11th changed you?
Well, anything terrorist related usually did not happen in the United States on such a large scale. So from that point on, I was a little nervous to fly or go out of the country. It just made me more concerned that it was going to happen again, because even now we always have these threats of, especially on the anniversary of 9/11, for many years after that, there was always a giant threat that something bad was going to happen. And so from then on, as an adult, I've just been nervous that something bad will happen again.
What did you do on September 12th?
I was just very nervous. We were still waiting for something else to happen, because nobody knew. All the planes had been grounded all over the United States. Wherever they were close to, they were told to go to the nearest airport, and they had to land. All the flights were grounded from the sky, so you couldn't hear any planes in the sky. It was just dead quiet. And all over the TV, there were people holding signs saying, missing my dad, missing my wife, missing my husband. And it was just extremely upsetting. I did a lot of getting upset. And I was just glued to the news, hoping to find something good come out of it.
What has been the most difficult thing for you from 9/11?
Believing that it actually happened. Thinking that I actually possibly watched the planes that flew into the World Trade Center while I was sitting on the bridge in traffic that day, thinking, not knowing what was going on. And watching all the documentaries that have come out since then, and all the horrifying experiences people went through. There's one where people are jumping out of the windows of the building because that's the way they'd rather go. And it's just heartbreaking to me. And now people that were at ground zero and were helping people get out of the building are now getting sick and dying from everything they were exposed to there. So it's hard to explain to somebody who wasn't around for that, because it was an unexplainable thing that happened. And it was just very difficult mentally. And it still is today.
For those who survived the attacks or were in close proximity, and even people who were watching on TV, it is a day they would like to forget. Sadly, this horrifying event has left some survivors with injuries, both physical and mental. PTSD is the most common illness in the 9/11 community, and it affects people who are directly exposed and indirectly exposed. People were indirectly exposed to the horrors of the attack through the extensive TV coverage, which resulted in many people across the country being put at risk for the development of PTSD. PTSD is characterized as trouble sleeping, difficulty in controlling anger, losing interest in activities, flashbacks, and emotional numbness, all of which can be debilitating. It has been estimated that 30% of first responders have developed behavioral health conditions such as depression and PTSD. Many of those first responders did not get treated for PTSD until years later, like Brian from the documentary Rebirth, who was a first responder and lost his brother, who was also a first responder. He didn't get diagnosed with PTSD until 7 years later. This is partly due to the lack of funding to support first responders up until 2015, when the Zendroga Act was extended. Thanks to more funding to support first responders and those who were affected by the attacks on 9/11, people have been able to get the help they so desperately needed, such as therapy, medication, and many other ways of healing. Also, the completion of the One World Trade Center and 9/11 Memorial have helped people over the years remember loved ones who gave their lives. We will never forget and can't change what happened on September 11th, but we can help those who were affected heal stronger than they ever were before.